So this is one that I think is good because the sequel is coming out this year. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with book recommendations from the TBR basket. So just like it sounds like, we are going to be doing book recommendations based on some of the prompts I have in my TBR basket, which I do at the beginning of every single month. This is how I pick the reads that I am going to be reading in the upcoming month. And I have probably over 100 in here. I don't actually know how many are in here. So I thought we would do maybe 5 or 6. We'll see how easy it is to find things. We'll pick a prompt out of here and find a book that I would recommend if you were looking for that prompt. This could be something that a lot of these prompts are just pretty normal prompts you see on most readathons. If you are a TBR person, then this is your recommendation. If you would like to have a fun TBR game, use this video, whatever you want. I just thought it'd be kind of a fun way to do book recommendations for very specific types of prompts. So let's just dive in and see what we've got. I don't even remember most of what's in here, I'm not gonna lie, because I don't ever take things out unless I get it and then realize that that prompt no longer applies. So let's just dive in. Let's see what we've got here. So this will be our first prompt to recommend, and it is falling. So we have, a poetry collection. Okay, so I don't read a lot of poetry anymore, but I used to read a bunch. Okay, so I have a book that I read, I want to say it was my very first magical readathon that I read this for. I remember it was the August round too. For some, I don't know why I have this vivid memory, but it was like my very first year here on YouTube. And I read this poetry collection, which is Yesterday I Was the Moon by Noor Unar. I'll hold it up here so you guys can kind of see. It is a collection of really short poems. There's some art in here as well. It's a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and read what it says here because that's probably going to give you a better idea than what I can say what this book is about. So it says this book contains poetry about art, heart, people, home, you, courage, self-love, strength, culture, acceptance, and survival. Now, I know you probably can tell, but I tapped the crap out of this book. It's probably due a reread because I know for a fact that some of these pictures or like some of the colors, I don't really know why I chose that color, but I remember reading through this and like every poem or two I would read something and it would really, really hit. So I think that this is a really good poetry collection for someone who maybe wants to get into poetry. It doesn't have like any of the fancy rhyming. They're really, really short. Some of them are a little bit longer, but a lot of them are very short. Like some of them are even just like a couple of sentences. So if you're not a poetry person, then this is a good one to start with because it's a very interesting poetic style, but also I think there's something in this book for everybody. Like I related to a lot of this book, but this book covers a wide variety of conversations and topics, kind of like it says here on the front. So it'll probably, at least one poem will hit everybody, I think. So as my recommendation, I haven't talked about this in quite a while. I remember adoring this one. So that's my recommendation for poetry collection. Please read Yesterday I Was the Moon. I randomly just picked this one up and it turned out to be amazing. All right, so number 2. Let's just dive in here. Oh, this one. So let's see. This one says, husband pick. Okay. Ooh, you know what we'll do? We'll make Chris decide. So I'll come back a little bit later once he gets home from work, but I'll make him choose a book that he recommends, just in general. What could it be? I'm going to say it's Watership Down just because I know him. Chris is here. He's now home, so he can give his recommendation. So the prompt was literally just husband pick, so you can literally recommend anything, just a book that you would recommend and why.
Okay.
Not work.
I spun around the room and found The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. This was one that, you know, being the giant nerd I am, I was listening to NPR and I heard them interview Brendan Slocum about this, and I was like, wait, music, mystery? That sounds like it was made for me. And it was very good. I'm one who usually has a pretty good guess as to who done it.
Yeah, you're really good at that.
I did not in this one. Now, in fairness, I may not have been on my A game. I maybe should have figured it out, but I didn't. Like, even when he figured it out, I was like, oh, that was not what I thought was happening. And even if I had gotten it, I don't think I would have gotten the reasoning right.
Okay.
It was very... I enjoyed that one. It's about this dude who has a... he accidentally has a Stradivarius violin, which are very high quality violins. There's only a few of them in existence. And he just kind of accidentally has it and it goes missing. And nobody knows who took it or why or where it is. Yeah, it's very... I enjoyed this one.
But also isn't the main character black? So there's also like
it's about
civil
a black
rights.
Solo violinist.
In
So
North Carolina.
rather than sitting in orchestras, he travels around and does solos with orchestras. Mm-hmm. But it was...
I remember you liking it a lot.
I enjoyed this one.
Cool. There you go. That's Chris's recommendation if you are a mystery music person.
Or if not, just read it anyway.
If you like books.
It's my recommendation. So read it because I recommended it.
I love it. Thanks, dear. Yeah. All right, number 3, the third prompt that we've got here is this one. And so, let's see. This one is, to read a sci-fi. So a sci-fi recommendation. Okay. What's a good sci-fi? I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but the ones I have read I enjoyed. I have a couple of options here because I'm me and I couldn't decide. So, I am a huge fan of books that are written differently. This is actually a series of books. It's a trilogy, and I talked about it a lot, but I loved this series because it was written non-traditionally. It's kind of mixed media. It's written in interview format. It's very sci-fi, but it's also fascinating and short, and you get through it really, really quickly. And that is the Themis Files trilogy by Sylvain Neuvel. We have Sleeping Giants, Only Human, and Waking Gods. Like I said, these are all relatively short books, and they are told in a bunch of different formats. You've got interview styles. You have like journals from people, so it's like video logs, but it's the transcripts from the video logs, things like that. So this book follows our main character Rose, or not our main character, but like the story starts with Rose, and she, when she was really young, like I think she's like 5, she fell into a hole in the ground and discovered this big metal hand and has made it her entire life's work. She kind of works with like a NASA style department, and they are investigating these big robotic things and where they came from. And then it just stems from that. But that's the general idea, and there's a lot to these books, but these are your stereotypical like sci-fi, not necessarily in space, but like set on Earth, and I just devoured them. I thought they were so good. If you're a fan of the Illuminae files, this is very reminiscent of that. I just found them very entertaining. So that's my sci-fi recommendation, but I did want to mention another kind of sci-fi that's really good if you are a romance fan, and that is Choosing Theo, and this is by Victoria Aveline. This is a alien romance, but it is very, like, it's not like the aliens are blue or green. It's like they are very humanoid in shape and look, and there's just a lot to them. But this book was the first in a series, which I haven't continued with, but I fell head over heels in love with them. I think it's so fun. But we have our main character Jade, who was basically kidnapped by aliens and sent to this planet. She's basically like kidnapped and then just deposited on this planet. And the planet's government discovers her and is finding a way for her to kind of live. They basically have a way where, because it's a class whatever planet, she can't go back to Earth, so the only way to kind of live out her life is to go by their customs, and their customs are that women are very, very scarce. They have a shortage of women in their society, and women are obviously really important because it helps continue the community and legacy and that kind of stuff. Women are thought of as very, very highly in this government, but it's also important because they are afraid of extinction. And so they have this system where women get married for 3 months to produce a child, and if at the end of the 3 months there's no child, or there whatever reason, they can continue with the relationship or they can leave it. Like, they can find themselves really compatible with this person and decide that they're going to continue, or they can say, we had a nice run, I'm gonna go find somebody else. And so she has to take part in this, but it's all by the women's choice. And so she finds this guy named Theo, who in this world, he's got all of these, like, they look like tattoos, but they're scars all along his arms, and a lot of women in the society don't find that attractive, but she is human, and of course she's like, tattoos, I like that. And so she finds him attractive and chooses him, and it's their relationship. The rest of the series follows, I think, all of his siblings as well, or like some of his siblings and some of his friends. So there's way more to it if you like it, but I loved her writing style. But I wanted to mention this one because I'm a huge romance person. You guys know that. So if you follow me, you probably like romance in some extent. So I wanted to recommend this if you are like a sci-fi person, but you also are a romance person. Also, they're just good. What are we on, 4 now? Yes, okay. Number 4. We're just going right through this here. It's very aggressive, but it's fun. Okay, so this one is a book with a beautiful cover. Okay, this is mean. I have so many books with beautiful covers. I love a beautiful cover, so... Okay, I have to have a think on this one. This is one I recommend a lot, actually. Not necessarily for beautiful covers, but it does have a beautiful cover. I have the Fairy Loot edition, although the cover itself is like, the colors are different, but the art of the cover is the same. And it's perfect for this time of year when it's the end of summer, beginning of fall, because this is very low-key witchy, which is, in my opinion, a very fall thing. So that is The Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a witchy romance, but it's cozy. So if you are a big fan of like cozy fantasy vibes, that kind of thing, this is definitely your book. It came out a couple of years ago. I read it, was it the beginning of this year, I think, is when I read it. But I swear by this book, and this cover is just beautiful. I also, because I have a special edition, I shall show you, the cover itself is also quite beautiful. But the original cover is the same illustration, just not as purple. This book follows our main character, Mika Moon, who is a witch. And in this world, takes place in the UK, and in this world, bad things happen when there's a lot of witches in one spot. And so they don't ever kind of hang out. They're all very loner-y, but they do meet up every once in a while to, like, every couple of months. It's like a book club to make sure that everything is good to go and that they are safe and that there's no kind of things that are happening in the witchy world. You can't tell people that you're a witch, like the normal people who don't have magical powers. And so Mika has been on her own. She moves every few months, and she's just very, like, wandery. And so her outlet, if you will, is the equivalent of this world's YouTube channel. And so she makes one that is very witchy aesthetics, and it's actually her doing magic, but it's her way of, like, rebelling, because people see it and just automatically assume that she's just, not actually magical, not actually a witch. It's just like sleight of hand stuff. But she gets a message online because someone sees her videos and discovers that she's a real witch. And they have 3 young girls at this house that are all witches, and they need help. And they're asking her to come teach them. And so she does. So she goes to this house. It's this house in the middle of nowhere. It's got the caretaker. It's got the housekeeper. We've got the groundskeeper. And then we've got the librarian. And then these 3 girls. And so she has been asked to stick around to help them learn about their powers. So it's very loose when it comes to the structure of the magic system, but it's definitely for fans of Romance. It's because it's got like the librarian is the love interest, and he is very grumpy and set in his ways, and he doesn't like her coming in and changing things, and so it's that kind of vibe, whereas Mika is very loosey-goosey, goes with the flow kind of stuff. So it's good for fans of fantasy that are just starting to get into fantasy because it feels very realistic. It's set in our world, but it has some other stuff to it, so it's very good for that, but also romance, and I love them. And it is adult, but it's not like, I think it's got like a smutty scene, but it's not crazy smutty. I just really enjoyed it, and the romance is really, really cute, and also a beautiful cover. So that's what I'm gonna choose. I could have chosen so many things for this prompt, but this felt like the appropriate time of year to recommend that one specifically. All right, number 5. I'll do this one, which is, oh no, now I'm just throwing things. To read a book with a tagline. So, to recommend a book with a tagline. Interesting. So, this is one that I read a while ago. I'm sure, was this for a readathon as well? No, I think I just read this for the sake of it. It was like one of the first books I read really, really early on in my YouTube career, but it does have a tagline, and it is a fairy tale retelling of sorts. So, I thought I would recommend it because I haven't talked about it in quite a while, and that is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. The tagline right here says, "A princess must have her prince." This is a reimagining of The Little Mermaid, which I feel like is good to recommend right about now because of the new Little Mermaid live action that came out recently. This one follows our main character, Lyra, and in this world, they're not mermaids, they're sirens, which I'm sure is roughly the same as far as like anatomically, but so Lyra is one of the sirens, and their kind of whole thing is they collect hearts. She specifically collects, I think, princes' hearts. She's got 17 in her collection. And so, due to a twist of events, there's this guy that's a prince. He's in a ship, and one of her own tries to get him, and through some stuff that happens, he's alive, but she ends up killing one of her own. And her mother, who's the Sea Queen, is not a fan of this, and so she turns her into a human, which is the one thing that they all hate, and basically tells her that she has a few weeks, I think it is, until the winter solstice to deliver the heart of said prince. So she has to go on land and convince him and kind of literally steal his heart. But his whole thing is that he is a siren hunter. So this takes place on a ship like the whole time. And it's their story, and I remember really, really enjoying it. I remember flying through it when I was reading it, and I don't think I had an audiobook. I think I was like actually physically reading it, and y'all know it takes me forever to get through things physically. So I flew through this one. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It had the elements that you want when you're expecting a Little Mermaid retelling, but it also had there's just way more to it than that, and I really enjoyed the story, and it was just really good, and I will always think highly of this. So, if you are a Little Mermaid fan and want that like Little Mermaid retelling, something similar, this is your book, and I have not recommended it in a very long time. So, there you go. All right, number 6. I thought we'll just go ahead and do 8 because that's how many I usually pull out every month. So why not make that a fun little game? So number 6 is this one. Alrighty, so this prompt is to read a book with an embossed cover that's under the dust jacket. So recommend a book. These are not showing up on camera, but recommend a book with an embossed cover. So like something that's on the cover under the dust jacket. So that basically means a fairy loot book at this point, because that's what I've got. That's got that in it. Okay, so I have one that I really enjoyed. It's a fairy loot book, so of course it is, but it's really good, and the sequel is either out or is coming out. I feel like it's coming out in September. I feel like it's not quite out yet, but that is Only a Monster by Vanessa Lynn. And then just to prove that it is embossed, there we go. Beautiful. So this one I remember reading. I want to say I read it at the beginning of last year. Is that right? When did I get this in a fairy loot? This one came from January 22. So I think I read it for last year's April readathon, as far like magical readathon. I remember reading it for the magical readathon because it had a lion on it, and I needed something with claws, and he has claws there. So I remember it was such a random prompt that I needed and I was struggled to find. So that's why I remember it so vividly. But I didn't know what to expect going into it, and I remember loving it. So we follow our main character, whose name is Joan. And she is sent to live with her mother's side of their eccentric family. I believe it's in England. Yeah, in London. And she's 16 and she works at a job at this historic Holland house. And really, really enjoys it. Has a coworker named Nick that she is like fallen for. He finally asks her out on a date. And then, due to certain events, a Good Samaritan moment goes terribly wrong. And it is discovered that she descends from monsters who all have this special power about kind of like time travel. And Nick is a monster hunter. So even though he likes her, his whole like job is to kill her and her family and everything. And so she ends up teaming up with this guy named Aaron, who is from a rival monster family. And they are trying to survive and figure out a way to do some stuff. Like some stuff goes down and then they're trying to figure out a way around it. So it's time travel-y in a way, but it doesn't time travel too far. It's a lot of fun. It's reminiscent in my head of like The City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. So if you're a fan of that, I don't know if I just wasn't expecting a lot going into it, but when I read it, it just kind of took over my soul and I was obsessed with it. So I recommend this one because it has an end. There is, I think, an epilogue or a conversation at the very, very end of this book that leaves some questions towards the future. Yeah, there's an epilogue that leaves some questions towards the future, but it also, this has an end, so that if you are satisfied with this story, that's great. You don't have to read on, but if you want more, you can. So that's why I wanted to recommend this one specifically, because it can be kind of like a one and done if you are not feeling it or if you're happy with how the story ended. But I really enjoyed it. It's a fun YA story about time travel and monsters. And when I say monsters, I mean like they all have different abilities. I just found it really, really interesting. And the world and the kind of like gift that makes them monsters is fascinating to think about. And there's a lot of conversations about morality in here, and I just am usually not a fan of that, but it worked for me. So I really enjoyed this one. So that's the one that I recommend. So we're now on 7. Yes, number 7. Well, maybe it's that one. It flew out. We have this one, which is to pick a cozy read. Ooh. Okay, cozy. Oh, so many things could be cozy. Okay, I have options because I'm me. So I picked a middle grade YA and adult book that I would consider cozy. So when I think of cozy, I usually think of like fall, sitting in a chair with a cup of something warm, coffee and or tea, hot chocolate, whatever your heart desires, candles, blankets, the whole 9 yards, and you can just kind of sit down and snuggle up. So usually I think murder mystery, but none of these are murder mystery. So the middle grade that I think would be good, this one actually kind of does fit into the fall vibe, is Beasts and Beauty by Soman Chinani. It's Dangerous Tales. This is the author of The School for Good and Evil. It is literally a collection of reimagined fairy tales. So in this book, we have a bunch of them. There's Red Riding Hood, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel, Hansel and Gretel, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, Peter Pan, like all of these things. But he has taken them and made them different. So this is definitely darker toned stories. There's a lot of diversity in these stories. There's beautiful illustrations in here as well. But you take all these stories that you think you know, and he has changed them in some way. So I find this fun because fairy tales remind me of cozy, so I feel like this is a good one. I guess it's a little bit darker just because of the fairy tales in general are kind of dark. When you think about like the original like Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So it's not like the happiest, but it would be good for like a nice fall day. And this middle grade, if you're into, middle grade, the YA book is a graphic novel and it's super popular right now because there is a TV show adaptation on Netflix. I'm sure all of you have read it, but that's Heartstopper. I only have the first volume right here, but I mean, there's 4 out, so you can continue reading them, but it is a male-male romance between these two guys named Nick and Charlie, and it takes place in like a British UK setting. They're in school. Charlie is out and proud. He has had some issues with coming out and that kind of stuff, but he is out, and he becomes friends with this guy named Nick, who is figuring, at least in the first volume, he's figuring out his sexuality, and they become friends, and then something more, and it's genuinely one of the sweetest moments. So you could literally, like, they are big panels, and there's not a lot of dialogue in them, and like I said, there's 4 volumes out, but you can search online. Alice Oseman did serialize them online before they were put into these actual physical copies. So if you're like me and you want to wait, I think there's one or two more volumes that are still coming out, but there are 4 out right now. The 5th one comes out at the end of this year, and I think it's finished. I think you can go online and watch and like read the whole thing if you want to for free, so you don't have to like purchase them. But these are really easy to get through, to cozy up. They give you all of like feelings, and you will fly through these in no time. I love these graphic novels. I think they're so sweet, and I love the TV show that's based on them. So that's your YA book. And then your adult book is for my Jane Austen fans, and that is The Missing Manuscript of Jane Austen by Sari James. This is a fun novel that follows our main 2 characters. We have Samantha, and then, what's the guy's name? Oh no, I can't remember his name. Anthony, that's who it is. So Samantha is in the UK for some reason, in England, and she like buys this poetry book that was supposed to have been owned by Jane Austen, and she's kind of going through it and discovers, because in the old days, what they would do is, like, when you buy a book, you would have to actually like cut the pages because the way it was bound. And so she finds there's a couple pages that haven't been cut yet, and so she goes to cut them and discovers this unfinished letter by Jane Austen that suggests there's another manuscript out there. And so she kind of deep dives and finds this estate that's owned by Anthony, and she is convinced that the manuscript is on this estate, and so they go find it. And this book is 80% the manuscript, because once they find it, they read it together. And so it is definitely inspired by all of her work, but it does feel like early Jane Austen. Like, I don't know how this author does it, but she writes this book like Jane Austen would. And the idea in this story is that the missing manuscript was a precursor to all of her other books. So you see hints of Darcy and like all of these other different characters that are in her other books in this book, and it's like the very first step into writing that character. So I really liked it. It did feel like another Jane Austen book, but because this is like them cozying down and reading this manuscript, you feel like you're right there with them cozying down and reading this manuscript by Jane Austen. So I just thought that would be kind of fun and cozy as well. So there are some options depending on what you are interested in as far as cozy vibes. Okay, and we'll do one more, the last one, number 8 is this one. And this one is, let's see, okay, it takes so long to get them out of the freaking things. So this is to read a cover by, so, a book that I bought because of the cover, maybe? When I say cover by for this one, I mean the cover grabbed my attention. I read what it was about and then proceeded to purchase it, because I do sometimes buy books based on covers, but those are all mass markets, and usually it's because of a specific author that I buy those. But when it comes to other books, I usually have to look into what they're about. So anyway, the one that I'm picking for this one is The Familiars, and this is by Stacey Halls. This is another good book for this time of year, early fall, because it's very magical realism. It has some witchy elements, but they're not set in stone, if that makes any sense. So this takes place in England in 1612, and we follow our main character, Fleetwood Shuttleworth, which, what a name. So in this book, she is pregnant, and she discovers this hidden letter from her physician that warns that she will not, kind of warns her husband that she will not survive the birth. And she thinks that he is keeping this from her because he really wants an heir, and, you know, misogyny. So she runs into this other woman named, what's her name? Alice, who's a local midwife. And so she and Alice become really close, and Alice helps her out through all of this while she's kind of like freaking out and trying to find a way to survive the birth. And so it's way more than that. It takes place at the time of the witch trials when they took place in America. It's in England, so it's not the exact same place, but it's around that time. And so witches is a very big conversation, and the idea of whether or not Alice is a witch is a huge part of the plot. So it's historical fiction with magical realism elements is the best way that I can describe it, but the cover is so pretty. Like, look at all those flowers. Like, that's what drew my attention. And then when I read what it was about, I was like, oh, I must read this. This sounds good. And then I did, and it was quite good. Surprisingly good. It's also quite beautiful as far as the story goes, and this relationship between these two women is amazing. I love it. So I recommended this one as well. If you want something that is early fall, like you're like me, and I'm not ready for fall quite yet, but I'm trying to get into the mood, and this is definitely one that's not a fall book per se, but it has elements like witchiness. It takes place during the winter, I believe, so it's really, really cold, and it has those elements that kind of like hint towards the colder end of the year months. So I highly recommend this one as well. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this very, very random recommendation video of sorts. I love doing things like this. I think it's so fun. Please let me know if you've read, as always, if you've read any of the books that I have mentioned in today's video down below, or if you have a recommendation for a specific prompt that came up today that you have something that you just really want to recommend. I would love to know. Or if you want a specific, like you have a specific prompt that you would like a recommendation for, let me know that as well. I would love to recommend some more things, and then like maybe we can all recommend each other some stuff. So please let me know all of your bookish thoughts down below. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!